just give everybody another minute and then we can get started. All right. Thanks everyone for coming for the November 2024 OpenZFS leadership call. So I guess to start, Don, did you want to talk a little bit about, I know you're just getting into it, but the investigation into the Dedup prune issue, 16713?
I just started this morning, so I don't really have any details. I'm going to try to reproduce and figure out what he's doing.
Yeah, the report lacks a bit of detail, and some of the mention of replication and so on is confusing, but want to make sure that if we're not somehow pruning blocks that we shouldn't be.
Yeah, I'll come up to speed a little bit more, and then I'll ask questions in the issue to see if I can get more data.
Yep. And then the second issue, I think, was 717 or something. These reports that they don't have the problem anymore when they stop using their custom modified branch of ZFS. So I think that one we can probably just close. That was the one where truncating a file from a terabyte to a gigabyte, and they said it wasn't actually being reflected. And I think Mav, you had asked, what does this have to do with?
Well, yeah, I would expect it either to be for any dedup or not dedup at all, because I don't see how fast dedup would be different. But yeah,
well, and just the truncation, like that's the object layer even. So
yeah, truncation should issue freeze, and unless somehow dedup does something bad to freeze, actually it should change. Aside of block freeze should change file size on VFS layer. So wherever space is freed or not, file size should be reduced. So it's weird. That's why I asked him to show ls. I'm not sure I can trust DU in that sense. Even with that argument, I'm not sure what it does. But yeah, if he can't reproduce it anymore himself, then I guess close for now.
It looks like they closed it themselves even, so.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Another one that we recently opened, kind of related, not really though, was, users were reporting that when deleting a very large number of files, especially when using any kind of dedup or BRT or a bunch of other mechanisms where we've normally create a ZIO to go and do the free in the background, since there might be IO related, I might have to read the BRT table or the DDT in order to see if we should do the free, was creating so many ZIOs. In the case of, I think it was a 2 terabyte file in the one report, that it would create, 20 gigabytes worth of ZIOs in RAM, and was causing the out of memory things to trigger. And so we've looked at something we've kind of had in mind for a while, which is just when you're deleting big files or just lots of files, to use the asynchronous destroy mechanism that we already do for destroying snapshots and data sets, so that the RM will happen quickly, but the space reclaim will happen in the background and be spread across a couple of transaction groups. So we have a pull request open for that now to start having more discussion about what the right way to do that is and make sure that we don't create all those ZIOs all at once and run the system out of memory.
Well, yeah, I just commented on it an hour ago, and I had 2 comments. One is that we are postponing free for some indefinite period of time, so deletes are not exactly potentially net free. But since we're doing that for block cloning or dedup, we are not expecting it to free anyway, potentially. So it's not exactly a regression, it's just lack of potentially improvement. But I agree that it should help for large file deletions, because for many small files, we may be able to handle that on level of transaction group assignment. So that just multiple deletions should spread between multiple transaction groups. It may be just a bit of layer violation, trying to look deeper inside and see how many space do we need to how many RAM do we need to handle all those deletes, and that may be messy. So this approach may be nice. It's just I've noticed that I don't think it may automatically help block cloning, since we don't have limits for those things per transaction group. So it should definitely help dedup, since dedup is easily to check. So we have dedup flag in block pointer, but I don't think we have any limit right now for block cloning. Number of blocks, deletion of limit on number of deleted blocks that were block cloned. So maybe we could check.
The limit is the number of just frees that will process per transaction group, right?
There are two different limits. One limits all total frees per transaction group, but it's now set to wint max or something like that. Okay. So it's disabled. And another limit is set to 100,000, but that's only for dedup. It would be nice to count block cloning same as dedup, but since we don't have a flag, it maybe two ways: either just each time check whether block potentially could be cloned, or somehow understand how exactly that block got onto the delete list. If it got as part of us being added there by us directly, then it must be cloned. Or if it goes from snapshot, then it may or maybe not cloned, who knows. So maybe that expensive check for whether block is potentially cloned may be the closest way we have. And so it's not cheap, not as cheap.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's the BRT maybe cloned or something like that it's called.
Yeah.
So yeah, we looked at a couple of different ways of trying to deal with that. But it looks like, there's still some more discussion. And like you said, maybe getting the rate limiting mechanism to apply to BRT or having its own, although it'd be nice not to have too many separate rate limiting mechanisms. But I think that would be helpful.
Oh yeah, I think just reusing one done for dedup should be reasonable. BRT may be slightly easier than dedup, but not so dramatically to make them different.
Next item, Don, did you have any updates on Z-test on multiple pools?
No, it's open. I moved it from a draft to it's open now, and I think Brian self-assigned for review. So looking for reviewers. It's like, I know that Z-test code is kind of, a challenge to look at, but I think my notes are sufficient to get a review. Basically, it's just extending kind of how ZFS stores the per process state. It's like instead of one blob, it's n blobs because we have n pools. So.
Yep. And then the next item, Mark Johnston from my team has posted a review for adding the range lock across ZFS get pages, which is what's required to get DirectIO working properly on FreeBSD from the sounds of it. So hopefully that can get the last bit of review and be able to land in time to be included in 2.3. So DirectIO works on both OSs that way.
Yeah, but I see it's marked work in progress, and there was some
feedback
discussion
from Brian, I think.
So, yeah, there was feedback from Brian, and I don't think Mark responded on that. So I haven't looked myself on a patch, but yeah, it wasn't looking as fully completed to me last time I looked.
Yep.
Not sure, it would be nice to fix it. Right now we have DirectIO blocked for FreeBSD because of that. but it would be nice to re-enable.
Exactly. Next up is a patch from someone else to add to fix the way ZFS send uses prefetch spill blocks. I think the way they describe it, it sounds like the spill blocks get prefetched, and then currently we don't actually use that prefetched one and call an arc read on them anyway, which is doubly unfortunate. So I think Brian's already reviewed that pull request and he's just asked for a rebase, and then hopefully that can move forward as well.
Yeah, I looked on the previous version, but not the last one. And it seems like it's completely different from the previous one. I need to look deeper, or anybody who has deeper understanding of send process could take a look. I'm not so deeply familiar with it.
Yep.
Because the previous approach that was proposed appeared not working. So hopefully this is better.
And then Marius has updated our pull request for scrubbing all the changes since the last scrub. So basically this records as part of the history, the transaction ID where the last scrub ended. And then with this extra flag, when you call scrub, it will just scrub everything newer than that transaction group without the user having to know what the transaction group numbers are. And that I think Jed just needed a rebase, and I think all the review feedback's been dealt with. So that's been updated now. And hopefully we'll be in good shape. And then another one that came up at the ZFS Summit, I guess that was last week. Sam actually did a hackathon project to try to implement this, and then we found that there was an open pull request for it already. So I wanted to highlight this work to implement default user and group quotas. So this does it somewhat similar to the way Oracle ZFS does it, but basically allows you to set, I think it's a data set property. If a new user group creates a file or whatever on this data set, it will automatically assign them these user and group quotas, so that you don't have to pre-assign every user their quota. Just as users create files, or as a new unique user is seen, it'll automatically assign them the default quota, rather than every quota having to be set manually. So for people to actually use user quotas, this seems like it would be a very nice improvement.
Yeah, if all users should have the same value, definitely interesting. If your parent data set, it's like home that only includes all the users' home or something.
Mm-hmm.
Patch seems to be pretty small, but yeah, it would be nice if somebody actually reviewed it. So far, nobody did.
Yeah, and that's why I brought it up here. I don't think many people knew it existed because we accidentally, it was reinvented at the summit last week.
Yeah, it would be nice to clean up their PR list. I'm trying to at least put labels properly, and I was able to close some older ones, but right now we're about 130 of PRs. Would be nice to get down to one screen instead of 6.
Yeah, and I think there's barely more than one screen that were open this year. A lot of the other ones are even older. But some of them, while they've been open since 2023, they're still active. It's not like they've been not touched in a year.
There are many that are actually old and are on the list just because there are some good ideas potentially could be re-implemented, but many of them got stale in one way or another and not applicable. And with Brian, we were thinking it would be nice to have some place to stash such good ideas aside for somebody else to sometime look on them.
Yeah, or maybe we just put some tag on them so that you can search closed ones that were like revisit or something, so that you're not looking through all 8,000 closed ones trying to find that good idea, but that we don't have to keep them open, just so that
we already have idle and stale tags. At least we could put them on old PRs to just, if they're still on the list, they're still not so much asking for attention.
Yeah, at least I think that will make it easier to keep on top of that list. Don, the next one is the async arc freeing during export.
Yeah, make sure I wasn't muted. Yeah, it's like I did some work. Alexander had some comments, and I ended up rolling out that sort of change. And then there was a bug where we were comparing. There's two SPA GUIDs, the ephemeral one that we have during runtime, and then the other one, and it was comparing them wrong. So we were leaking something, and then C-test found it because when we unload the module, it's like you can't destroy a list that has members on it. So I fixed that, and then George, can't remember his last name, who did the original L2 arc, he looked at it.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
I think he signed off was the last comment.
Yeah, so I can rebase it one more time, but I don't know if it's good to go. There were talks earlier about like unifying it with the eviction thread and all that, and I think that's a good idea, but it's sort of out of the scope of what this thing is doing. We're already in the current code, doing stuff at the same time as the eviction thread. This is just doing it decoupled from the export.
Right. I guess the question would just be like, is it even faster if you use the multi-threaded arc eviction stuff that we have in the other PR?
It possibly would be, yeah,
Mhm.
because it's just constrained by how fast you can tear down memory. But
yeah, this one's kind of the typical race of
yeah, it's a
who
typical
merges
like,
first, and the other person has to rebase.
well, and also yeah, just getting it across the finish line.
Tony, you're here. I wanted to ask briefly about your, I guess, your updated PR for the special allocation failsafe feature.
Oh yeah,
You,
just
go ahead.
a quick update. So after the new DDT stuff got in, I rebased the PR on top of master, and I was hitting assertions with some DDT stuff. And when I took out the assertion, it passed all the tests, but that doesn't make me feel good about it. So I was trying to look into why I was hitting that assertion. So that's basically where it is right now.
Okay. The question I had was in the description, it sounds like you can turn the dataset property off at some point, but you can't turn it back on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Do you know
because
what? Go ahead.
if you turn it back on, like let's say you turn it off and then you write a bunch of data and then you turn it back on again. Well, the data that you wrote in the middle is not going to be backed up to the pool. So then
Right.
when you're trying to import the pool again, you can't make that guarantee that like, oh, I can ignore the special devices being down.
Right, because there won't be a second copy somewhere.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess the other thing, Don, kind of related to what we talked about, or what you talked about, I think, last month, was the idea of possibly writing the additional copies in not the same transaction group, or mostly just being able to write them more asynchronously. In your case, it was making sure copies equals 2 that went to the same VDEV wouldn't be at risk of somehow not getting written correctly for both copies for indirect blocks. But kind of looking at what Tony's doing here, obviously the performance penalty of having, the advantage of having a special device is that it's going to be faster than your main pool devices, or in Tony's case, it's D-RAID, and so there's actual space efficiency savings to doing a special device, even if it's not faster. But did you have any thoughts on the idea of kind of trying to defer writing of the additional copies to lessen the performance impact?
No, I haven't looked into that at all.
And Don, did you, when you were talking about it for indirect blocks?
Not really. I'm just conceptually thinking like, we've always written them at the same time, but we write them in different spaces, but not in a different time. And if you only have one top level, it's like you're not getting necessarily the benefit of having that extra copy if you're involved somehow with some event, which we saw where a drive was misbehaving and in that window. So, but, I mean, other people have talked about it. I don't know if that was the Panzura case, but you could have, the second DVA could be somewhere else. But anyway, yeah, I don't know what that exact contract is. We've only tried to make it not in the same Metaslab, but we could have other contracts. But yeah, the special case, introduces all kinds of, different possibilities. Where the case I was thinking of is when you only have one top level. So it's like, could you do other things to help with sort of data resilience to bad things happening?
Okay. Did anybody have other topics they wanted to bring up? Sam, was there any more that came out of you're looking at the exposing more of the stats via the .zfs directory? I suppose not yet.
I guess for the record, I could, the videos, the full day videos are up on the OpenZFS for the summit, and hopefully the individual ones will land soon.
Yeah, I think Patrick's working on editing them.
And then, Alan, do we know if we captured, there was quite a few discussions in the user summit and even in the dev summit where we were capturing stuff. I don't know where that was going to land.
Like, you mean the ideas or?
Yeah, ideas and things like that. It's like,
yeah, I think there's another spreadsheet. I'll have to get the link and add it to the notes here of kind of the outcome of the user summit and what people saw. Because there was some especially interesting stuff around auditing as well. Sean, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah. First time caller, long time listener. Let's see. One of the things that we've seen and are kind of interested in, or just kind of like exposing or getting a little bit of discussion and awareness around is flushing of transaction groups on EBS volumes, and specifically the performance impact that happens there on GP3 volumes. Because when you have a large amount of pending or dirty data that gets flushed to disk, we're observing few things in the wild. One of them is there's back pressure that comes back from an EBS volume, and the other one is there's a lot of idle time on the write path for disks. And some of the background on this is that EBS internally, EBS volumes are cut up into 8 different partitions, and there's circuit breakers for the individual partitions. And so, one of the things that I'm interested in kind of discussing or exploring is both pacing out the dirty data so that writes for dirty data gets destaged to disk incrementally over time, because on an EBS volume, it's not like it's spinning Rust where you're waiting for the drive head to come around to flush when on a single sector kind of a thing. Instead, like what you want to do on an EBS volume is actually you want to spread the writes out over the entire volume so that you're distributing the write workload across as many of those internal EBS partitions as possible. The other thing is you want to pace this out so that you're not hitting the circuit breaker at any one time. Because like right now, what the observed behavior is everything's 0 as far as write activity, and then the transaction timeout or it fills up. You see this obviously huge spike in both bandwidth and IOPS. and then the volume goes back to sleep as far as like write activity. But when that happens, if you have enough write activity happening, you'll see back pressure from the EBS volume, and this presents itself as really high write latency, and it's detrimental for foreground applications that are trying to write through ZFS. So I just wanted to throw that kind of out there as and tease or intro that, because I think that that's important for customers or people that are using ZFS in cloud environments. And I don't think that this is limited to just AWS either. I'm just saying this, I think that this applies to probably any NVMe type interface that's not spinning Rust.
Sean,
Yeah, like
does the EB, is there a way to expose the, like the fact that it's been sharded across 8 things or anything like that?
No, unfortunately. But
we
I
do
do know
know
that that's I can say with a high degree of confidence that it's 8, and I can assume that it's probably not going to change from 8 to 12.
Yeah, because when we're allocating the blocks for ZFS, we try to go across the top levels, and then we have an internal bias for like lower level LBAs because historically they were faster, but we don't have any
Right.
knowledge like that of distributing across the down. We go across,
Right.
but we don't go down. So we
don't-
certainly consider that.
I don't think. Sorry, I don't think we actually have that preference for lower LBAs these days. It was disabled by introduction of some new code. It's still in code, but I think it's dead for most of pools. But right now we are, like if you're writing a single file, it will likely be written into one meta slab, so will be localized on a pool. But if you have enough CPUs to use to satisfy multiple allocators, then you should write up to 4 meta slabs in different position of disk if you write multiple files. So I think that maybe as close as we can get right now to multiple position. I'm not sure how many multiple would you like, but introducing more would increase traffic of space maps updates. So I was thinking actually about opposite, to reduce number of active allocators if we don't have enough data to make it worthwhile.
If you have enough data, yeah, but if you have enough data, like if you've got through a file system, you've got a write-ahead log, that can be a pretty hot file, and then that becomes a hot partition inside of the volume, and then you can trip the internal circuit breakers there, and when you exhaust the available IO tokens for your device.
No, right now each file is assigned to only one allocator. So if you have only one active file, that it will be written in one place on a disk.
Yeah,
it's a bit sort of a balance. You want it to be spread, but from other side we don't want extra fragmentation. Probably that's why it's placed in one location.
Yeah. The other like so there's the other thing to kind of consider is like, can we pace this out so that the dirty data for this file gets written out incrementally and doesn't show up as a single, high intensity, I'm going to call it high intensity, high throughput, series of write transactions that get destaged to disk.
Are those tokens you mentioned, are they for all IOs, so they affect reads too, or why do we care about write latency while we're doing writes?
It does. Reads will block behind writes in this case because the IO quota for the NVMe device is reads plus writes.
Yeah, we saw the same thing with another customer at Linode's NVMe backed thing, kind of similar to EBS, where every 5 seconds they would see a spike in the read latency as well, because they were using their entire quota of IOPS on the big chunk of writes from the dirty data, and it would cause the read latency to spike kind of in parallel every 5 seconds or whenever the transaction would end.
Not exactly throttling, but have any of you tried to reduce max async whatever queue parameter from 3 down to like 1?
No, what is this?
I don't
definitely
think
give
that
it a
would,
twirl.
I don't think that one would help.
Maybe not max, but min. I think min we have 2 at this point, if I remember correctly. it was made to cover IO latency, which may be substantial for some HBAs. Maybe if.
What was that again? Or what was the name of the tunable, Mav? I can give it a twirl.
I think it's ZFS VDEV async write min.
Something like that.
Okay.
Let me look.
So the min and the max, it scales between the minimum and the maximum based on how full the dirty data is. So as the amount of dirty data gets higher, it will use more writes for the async, but we're not triggering to do that until the transaction group is past quiescing. And we think that maybe starting to trickle the writes out sooner might smooth this out a lot more instead of making the transaction take longer to write out. We want to write out more of it before the transaction is actually over.
It's VFS, ZFS, VDEV, async, write max active or write min active.
There we go. Okay, min active, max active.
Yeah. So
specifically the async ones.
Yeah.
Depending, so sync one is for 0 writes, while async ones are normal writes, and it should self-adjust between min and max depending how much dirty data you have. If your pool is mostly idle and you don't need writes all the time, you may reduce min to 1, and you always have no more than 1 write request in executing on a disk. So this is as close as being non-invasive you can get right now. There's no throttling beyond that.
Okay. Oh, that's good and useful. I will give that a tune, a tweak, but I think that I guess so that I guess let me say this. So if you've got data that's quiesced and waiting to be destaged, this will help drain that over time and reduce the burstiness. Or
when transaction goes into sync, all the IOs will be generated, but for each disk, only one will be executed at a time.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I think that there's room for potentially pacing out this, or even potentially having multiple transaction groups. Because like I've run into situations where the NVMe device will go on walkabout for upwards of 60 seconds, and I've got data that's still coming in, and I don't want to have all IO through the ZPL block because that has a very dramatic customer, application impact. And I work in the distributed systems area, so like it's okay from my applications perspective to have that kind of data accumulate.
Yeah, and I think to Mav's point on the allocators, if we could tune that to align with the number of partitions underneath, that would help. But I think it would also maybe touch on Don's work on large blocks in the Metaslab layer, where maybe we can apply something to the fragmentation weighting to purposely try to kind of promote metaslabs from each of those 8 partitions, like metaslabs that are more far apart. I think right now when it goes to the list, it kind of just, if they have equal weight, then we will just kind of use them in order from the lowest metaslab number. Whereas it sounds like we prefer to, modulus that by 8 and prefer 1 from each 1/8 of the drive, basically.
You want like an anti-affinity so that you pick a metaslab that's almost as far away from this device as possible, or from that first partition as possible.
1/8 of the device.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have logic similar to that when we are writing second and third copies of the file, but I don't think we have them in between different allocators. But I guess we could introduce
like you said, you probably wouldn't want that by default because you're dirtying more metaslabs. But if you have this case where you purposely want to spread the writes out across the device because of
latency, back pressure,
latency or sub partitions or whatever, that it might be useful to be able to use that.
No, I'm talking about case when we already have multiple active allocators, the multiple files are written. Right now, I don't think when we choose Metaslab for them to write, to assign to each allocator, I don't think there is a logic to keep maximum distance.
Yeah.
It just tries to choose the best one for each, and distance use it only for second and third copy Metaslabs. But maybe if we could introduce it for the first Metaslab also, to some degree. And then it would just work in case of multiple files. If you need to go further to make it work for single files, then that's a different question.
Yeah, and back to my original thinking, it's like if there's truly 8 disks underneath, when we're trying to pick the second DVA, we should stick it on a different disk in terms of.
No, yeah, that's how it works. But if we can't, we use second third metaslab on the same.
Yeah, but we don't know. We don't know where those boundaries are. Actually, right now it just picks a different metaslab. That's all. That's the only constraint. We should probably pick a metaslab that's in a different domain underneath. But
yeah,
right
none
now
of that information is exposed though.
No,
but it is each one of those is appended, so it's a linear allocation.
Yeah, the original thinking is like you're on a hard disk, and so we had this concept of distance, and we removed that when the special class came in. But maybe we should go back to this concept of eighth. I need to be 1/8 away from my current one when I allocate a new DBA.
I think we still have that logic for the second and third copies. When we prepare, when we allocate those metaslabs, when we try to open them, I think we should.
No, it's not based on distance. It used to be based on distance. Now it's just purely a different metaslab.
If you say so, I don't remember.
Yeah, when the special class came in, that was simplified. So, but
maybe we can dig it out of Git and bring something like that back to life.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense in this case to be 1/8 away from where I was.
Yep.
And I just wanted to float that and throw that out there because that's an area of significant customer interest.
And Sean, has anybody attempted the poor man's solution, which is just partition it in 8 pieces and do 8 top levels? Or
no, but that's oddly brilliant. I will be able to pull on that thread. Holy shit. That's brilliant. Yes. Great. Thank you.
Well, I mean, if they are, I mean, we have the driver sees one, has one queue, and it's like you could have, if it's really 8 different disks, they should probably be represented as 8 different disks. But.
Yeah, but that's brilliant. I could stripe a Z pool across 8 partitions and manually create the 8 partitions on top of a single store.
Yeah, it's sort of a poor man's until we get, CFS to be smarter or.
Yeah, but we could even experiment and do the experiment to prove this out.
Yeah,
so
that'd be good. Why don't you do that and get back to us? Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's a very doable thing. Thank you for that.
Bit of a forehead smacker, that one, eh?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's not intuitive or not obvious, but like also it is as soon as you say it. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. We'll continue down the other path as well, but that's brilliant.
Did anyone else have any topics? I don't think I see anything else in the doc yet. I guess the other question I had was how are people liking the new early time of 10 a.m. Pacific instead of 9 a.m. Does that work better for people? Although I don't know, other than Sean and Tony, how many people from the West Coast actually managed to join us? And I guess the other question for the group is how often should we do the earlier one? I think right now we're doing it every 3rd or 4th meeting, but what do we think makes sense for a cadence for the early versus late meetings? Since I'm going to create the invites for the beginning of next year, it'll be useful to know how frequently we want to alternate back and forth between the 2 time slots. Nobody has an opinion?
For me, on East Coast, any work. I think it's West Coast versus Europe or some.
Yeah.
Now.
I think someone else was about to say something?
Oh, this is Tony. I like the 10 a.m. better, but that's just me.
Yeah, well, I think we've definitely seen it mean more people are attending, so I think it makes sense to do that. And it's mostly just how frequently do we want to do it? I think right now it's every 4th meeting, but do we want every 3rd meeting, every other meeting?
Wasn't every other previously?
No, it was like every 3rd or 4th time, and the calendar invite was never quite right, so people missed it half the time. And so trying to get the calendar invites correct, but you know, the way calendar invites work, you can't really express complicated schedules. And so I just wanted to figure out what people like as far as the schedule goes, and then I'll get it sent out.
Keep it simple, make it reliable.
Yep. Then I guess maybe we'll go with every 2nd meeting at the early time, and that will mean I just create 2 meeting invites of every 2nd month, and it auto repeats nicely instead of having to create them all manually. All right. Was there any other topics? We got another 15 minutes still if we need it. No, all right then. I guess we're done. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you in 4 weeks, which will be December 3rd at the usual 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific time slot. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.